A German family and their new maid were murdered at their rural farm on a Friday night in late March 1922. In an effort to identify the individual or people responsible for the tragic deaths of 6 people, law officials questioned a number of suspects. However, no one has ever been held accountable for the horrible killings that took place at the farm in Hinterkaifeck, a modest Bavarian farmstead, more than a century later. One of the earliest family murders in Germany that has not been solved is the Hinterkaifeck Murders. Before we continue telling you about the mystery of the Hinterkaifeck, subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos like this. Lorenz Schlittenbauer observed his neighbor's mail piling up at their property in the outlying Hinterkaifeck on April 4, 1922. Schlittenbauer, who was concerned that something wasn't right at the farm, enlisted the aid of his fellow neighbors Jakob, Sigl, and Pöll to look into it. The guys entered the house but found the front door locked. They went to the barn and found the deaths of Sigl Gruber, 7, Victoria Gabriel's 7-year-old daughter, and her parents, Andreas and Sigl Gruber, 64, 72. Numerous hits to the head were used to kill each member of the family. The bodies were covered with a board and some hay and had been piled on top of one another. The men discovered a hallway that connected the main house to the barn. As they looked around the house, the guys entered and discovered the remains of Joseph, Victoria's 2-year-old son, and the family's 44-year-old maid, Maria Baumgartner. Joseph and Maria had both been killed in their beds by blunt force trauma. Police uncovered the murders at the Hinterkaifeck farm on April 4, but they later discovered that the family had all passed away on March 31 in the evening. When Maria Baumgartner's sister later went to see her at the farm that afternoon, she was able to check that everyone was still alive. This had been Maria Baumgartner's first day working as the family's maid. 2 coffee salesmen stopped by the farm the following day, but nobody answered the door. Smoke was flowing from the chimney, and it appeared that someone had fed the family's livestock. On April 4, a repairman also showed up at the residence but was unable to locate anyone. The mounting mail, the absence of the family from Sunday church, and Sigil's absence from school all contributed to the search of the barn and the eventual finding of the killings. Hinterkaifeck's nearest police station was 45 miles distant in Munich, Germany. Schlittenbauer and the other men informed their families and nearby neighbors about the grisly murder scene at the property after finding the victims. By the time lead detective George Reingruber from Munich arrived, numerous individuals had already entered the crime site, destroying evidence and jeopardizing the police investigation. Police speculated that the murderer or murderers had somehow enticed the 4 family members out to the barn one by one to kill them before returning to the house to kill Maria and Joseph, despite the altered crime scene and the near absence of forensic testing at the time. Dr. Johann Baptist Aumüller performed autopsies on the Hinterkaifeck murder victims on April 5, 1922. He later came to the conclusion that they had all suffered blunt head trauma and that a pickaxe or mattock was probably used in their deaths. Dr. Aumüller also observed that the older Sigl bore signs of strangling. The younger Sigl probably spent hours dying while entombed beneath the bodies of her relatives. Sigl was discovered by investigators grabbing handfuls of her own hair and sporting many bald spots on her head. Dr. Aumüller believed the young girl most likely passed away from a mixture of shock and trauma. Numerous unusual things happened at the Hinterkaifeck estate in the weeks and months before the murders. The family's last maid reportedly left 6 months earlier because she thought the property was haunted after hearing footsteps in the attic. Additionally, neighbors reported to the police that Andreas Gruber discovered footprints in the snow that started in the farm's surrounding woods and terminated at the barn. He failed to locate any tracks leaving the barn, though. This information sparked the hypothesis that the murderer had been hiding out in the barn and possibly the attic, which some said would explain the footsteps the previous maid had heard. Andreas also mentioned that he had lost his keys and that he had noticed a newspaper in the house that he didn't subscribe to. He turned down the offer of a loan from a neighbor to defend himself and his family. Victoria and Andreas were charged with incest 7 years before the Hinterkaifeck farm's occupants were killed in response to an anonymous tip. The father and daughter were both tried, and they were both subsequently found guilty. According to varying accounts, Victoria spent 1 month or 1 year in prison while Andreas did the same. Some of the Gruber's neighbors thought Joseph, Victoria's 2 year-old son, was the result of Andreas' incestuous relationship with his daughter. Despite the fact that many people thought Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the guy who began the search of the farm on April 4, was the father of Joseph. Over 100 people were believed by authorities to be either the killer or killers during the course of the Hinterkaifeck murder investigations and re-investigations. The early stages of the investigation were dominated by a suspicion that Lorenz Schlittenbauer may have killed the family. Lorenz and Victoria apparently had a romantic relationship, and Joseph was said to be Lorenz's child. Some report that Lorenz even called Joseph mein Ubel, which translates to my boy. However, there were also rumors that Lorenz thought Andreas was really Joseph's father. According to reports, Lorenz even considered filing another incest case but decided against it at Victoria's urging. Schlittenbauer was ultimately disqualified as a suspect since there was no conclusive evidence linking him to the killings or establishing that he was Joseph's father. The ownership of the Hinterkaifeck farm, Victoria, not Andreas, was a contributing factor in the unrest there. After her husband Karl Gabriel passed away in World War I, she acquired possession. Some claim that Karl spent a few months living with his parents before enlisting in the military since he realized Casilia was actually Andreas's daughter. Since Karl's body was never discovered, some people theorized that he might have visited the farm again and killed the family as retaliation. There have also been claims that Karl appeared while wearing a Soviet military outfit during World War II. Authorities have never verified any of these theories, despite rumors to the contrary. The court physician took the skulls of all 6 victims once the autopsies were finished, and he reportedly sent them to Munich for additional study. Clairvoyants allegedly received the skulls of the Grubers and their maid as well, probably in an effort to find out further information about the criminal or perpetrators who carried out the atrocity. The skulls of the victims were kept in Munich for whatever reason. As a result, Maria Baumgartner, the family's maid, and the Grubers were buried without their heads. The skulls, according to the government, disappeared after WWII's upheaval and were never found. An elderly woman reportedly told police in 1999 that her previous landlord had claimed to knowing anything about the Hinterkaifeck killings. Authorities looked into this information and discovered that the landlord allegedly made this claim in 1935, but it was too late because the potential suspect identified in the tip had passed away. More than 80 years after the murders of the Gruber family and their maid, students at the Fürstenfeldbruck Police Academy employed cutting-edge methods to look into the unresolved case in 2007. In order to show respect for the suspects' living relatives and the victims' memories, the students eliminated all but one of the suspects they think was responsible for the killings at the Hinterkaifeck farm. However, because the suspect is deceased, they chose not to publicly identify him or her. If you want to watch more stories like this, please consider subscribing to our channel.